That cold morning, no one expected an act of kindness to change everything. What started as another day became a story the whole community tried to explain, and few had the courage to tell. Before we begin, subscribe and turn on the bell. Here, we show that behind struggle and silence, there are still human hearts. The air hung heavy with the scent of damp earth and distant rain, the kind that seeped into bones like an unwelcome memory. It was early, the sky a bruised grey over the outskirts of the small town, where cracked sidewalks met the shadow of an old community centre. The building itself was a relic. Faded brick walls etched with years of neglect, windows fogged from the chill inside. Fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, casting long shadows that danced like ghosts across the linoleum floor. Outside, the wind whispered through bare trees, carrying the faint echo of gravel crunching under tires as a few early arrivals pulled into the lot. This was no ordinary gathering. It was a support meeting for veterans, one of those quiet rituals where men and women who had stared down deserts and gunfire now confronted the silence of civilian life. The center's hallway stretched like a vein through the heart of the place, lined with folding chairs and bulletin boards, plastered with faded flyers about counseling sessions and K9 therapy programs. Dogs were a lifeline here, loyal shadows for those whose human connections had frayed. Their tags jingled softly in the distance, a rhythmic reminder of bonds forged in chaos. Elias had no business being there. At 17, he was a ghost in his own life, slipping through the cracks of a world that had long since stopped noticing him. His clothes hung loose on a frame too thin from skipped meals, a threadbare jacket zipped against the perpetual cold that seemed to live inside him. Bruises faded on his arms, hidden like secrets he couldn't voice, remnants of a home that was more cage than sanctuary. He'd run from it months ago, bouncing between alleys and abandoned lots, surviving on scraps of kindness from strangers who pitied but never lingered. Elias carried guilt like a weight in his chest, guilt for the mother who'd looked away, for the father whose rage had carved him hollow. He was good at heart, the kind of good that whispered in small acts, sharing a half-eaten sandwich with a stray cat, or stepping aside to let someone pass without a fight. But he tried to vanish, to blend into the grey, unseen and untouched. That morning, he'd wandered in by accident, drawn by the warmth leaking from the center's door. The shooting outside had shattered the quiet like glass underfoot. It started with a muffled pop, then another, sharper, echoing off the brick. Screams followed, thin and piercing as people scattered from the parking lot. Elias froze in the hallway, his heart slamming against his ribs, breath catching in his throat. The air thickened with the acrid tang of gunpowder, mingling with the sterile scent of the center's cleaning solution. Footsteps thundered, boots on pavement, urgent and heavy, while radios crackled in the distance, voices barking coordinates. He pressed against the wall, palms slick with sweat, the cool tile biting into his back. Why here? Why now? The center was supposed to be safe, a haven for the broken. Through the window, he saw flashes of blue lights pulsing like erratic heartbeats, emergency vehicles screeching to a halt. Inside, the veterans had gathered for their session, unaware at first. An older man, grizzled with a salt and pepper beard, sat near the front, his service dog at his feet, a sturdy German shepherd named Rex, ears perked, eyes alert. The veteran, Tom Hargrove, was a fixture here, his hands calloused from years gripping rifles in sandy wastelands. Rex was more than a pet, he was a tether, pulling Tom back from the edges of nightmares where explosions still rang in his ears. The shots grew closer, erratic bursts that made the windows rattle. Panic rippled through the room like a wave. People ducked under tables, chairs scraping against the floor with a harsh grind. Elias's mind raced, fragments of his own past surfacing, the slam of doors, the crack of a belt, the way his body had learned to curl small and silent. He wanted to run, to melt into the shadows outside, but his feet rooted him. In the chaos, Rex bolted, leash snapping free from Tom's weakened grip. The dog charged toward the hallway. Barking fiercely, a deep rumble that cut through the fear. Tom called out, voice hoarse, "Rex, heel!" But the animal was driven by instinct, lunging toward the danger as if to shield them all. Elias's breath came in shallow bursts, his pulse thundering in his ears. The hallway felt narrower now, the air electric with tension. Outside, shadows moved. Figures in tactical gear, perhaps off-duty military responding to the call, their radios hissing static. But inside, time slowed. Rex skidded into view, fur bristling, teeth bared at the unseen threat beyond the door. A shadow fell across the threshold, a shooter, wild-eyed, weapon raised, the metallic glint catching the dim light. The dog's growl vibrated through the floor, a warning that hung in the silence. No one moved. The veterans huddled, breaths held, eyes wide with the ghosts of old battles. Elias's hands trembled, fists clenched at his sides. He could slip away, disappear into the fray like he always did. But Rex's eyes met his, dark, unwavering, pleading in that primal way animals had. The dog's body quivered, muscles coiled, ready to spring. In that frozen moment, something cracked inside Elias, a moral wound reopening. The memory of his little sister left behind in that house of shadows, her cries echoing in his dreams. He couldn't ignore it. Not this. With a surge of adrenaline that burned like fire in his veins, Elias lunged forward. His sneakers squeaked on the tile as he grabbed Rex's collar, yanking the dog back just as the first shot splintered the doorframe. Wood shards flew, stinging the air, and Elias stumbled, pulling the shepherd behind a vending machine. The dog's weight pressed against him, warm and frantic, paws scrabbling for purchase. Heart pounding, Elias whispered, "Easy, boy," his voice barely audible over the roar in his ears. The hallway echoed with the chaos, shouts from outside, the whine of bullets ricocheting. Tom's voice cut through from the room, raw with desperation. "Rex!" But Elias held on, fingers knotted in the dog's fur, shielding him as best he could. The world narrowed to this: the heat of the animal's breath against his neck, the distant bark of other dogs in the lot, the unrelenting drum of his own fear. He didn't know these people, didn't owe them anything, yet here he was, an abused kid from the streets, standing between a loyal dog and whatever hell had come knocking. As sirens wailed closer, swelling like a tide, Elias realized the hallway was filling, not with danger, but with something else. Footsteps multiplied, heavy and purposeful, boots echoing like thunder. Soldiers, veterans from the nearby base, pouring in from every entrance, their dog tags clinking softly in the dim light. 150 strong, they formed a living barrier, shoulders squared, eyes steely. The air hummed with their presence, a quiet force born of shared scars. Elias peeked out, Rex panting beside him, and felt the first flicker of something unfamiliar. Not fear, but resolve. The shooting raged on, but in that corridor, humanity began to push back. The hallway pulsed with the weight of bodies now, a sea of camouflage and Kevlar pressing forward like a tide against the storm. Elias crouched behind the vending machine, Rex's flank heaving against his side, the dog's hot breath fogging the air between them. The shepherd's eyes darted, whites flashing in the dim light, but he stayed put, trusting the boy who had become his sudden anchor. Outside, the gunfire stuttered, short bursts that cracked like whips, answered by the deeper cough of returning fire from the arriving soldiers. Radios hissed with clipped commands. "Perimeter secure, flank left." The scent of cordite clung to everything, sharp and metallic, overlaying the faint earthy musk of the dogs, milling at the edges of the group. Elias's hands ached from gripping the collar, knuckles white against the worn leather. His mind spun, fragments of memory colliding with the present, the way his father's voice had boomed like those shots, unpredictable and shattering. He'd learned early to anticipate violence, to read the shift in a room's air before it exploded. But this was different. These men, these veterans, moved with a precision born of deserts and foxholes, their faces etched with lines that spoke of losses no one outside their circle could grasp. Society saw them as relics, ticking bombs from old wars, whispering about PTSD in hushed tones at diners and bus stops. "They're not right anymore," Elias had heard once, from a shopkeeper eyeing a man with a limp and a service dog. Overlooked heroes reduced to cautionary tales, their quiet struggles dismissed as weakness, yet here they were, surging into the fray, not for glory, but for the fragile sanctuary of this center, their one unfractured ground. Tom Hargrove pushed through the cluster at the doorway, his face ashen under the fluorescent glare, eyes scanning wildly for Rex. The veteran's hands trembled slightly, not from age, but from the echo of battles where dogs like Rex had been the only ones to come back unscathed. Tom had lost his squad in a sand-swept ambush years ago, their barks silenced forever in the roar of an IED. K9 units were more than partners. They were lifelines, pulling men from the abyss. Society judged them harshly, veterans with their nervous animals, clogging parks and waiting rooms, burdens on a system that had already forgotten their sacrifices. But in moments like this, the truth surfaced. Their toughness was compassion, armored thick, a shield for the vulnerable they couldn't save before. "Elias," a voice murmured close by, low and steady. It was Sergeant Hale, one of the first to arrive, his broad frame blocking the light as he knelt beside the vending machine. The soldier's dog tags glinted against his chest, cool metal catching the flicker of emergency lights outside. He'd spotted the teen earlier, a shadow in the back row, but said nothing. Veterans recognize their own kind of invisibility. "You got him. Good work, kid," Rex whined softly, nuzzling Elias's arm, the vibration rumbling through his bones. The boy's throat tightened. No one had ever thanked him for anything, not since he'd slipped away from the foster homes that smelled of bleach and indifference. He was the runaway, the troublemaker, judged by his hollow cheeks and guarded stare, but in Hale's eyes there was no pity, only the quiet acknowledgement of shared scars. The tension coiled tighter as shouts erupted from the parking lot. The shooter, a disgruntled local, unraveling from debts and delusions, had barricaded himself behind a row of cars, his weapon spitting fire toward the center's entrance. Bullets pinged off metal, whining through the air like angry hornets. Inside, the veterans formed ranks instinctively, squads coalescing without a word. Tom at the core, his battalion mates fanning out, hands steady on sidearms pulled from glove compartments and coat pockets. 150 strong, they filled the hallway shoulder to shoulder, a human wall of resolve. Boots scraped the linoleum in unison, the gravel crunch from outside fading under the steady rhythm of their breaths, deep, controlled, the kind honed in training fields where wind whipped sand into eyes and fear into focus. Elias peered around the edge, heart hammering a frantic tattoo against his ribs. The air grew warmer, thick with the press of bodies and the faint, acrid bite of sweat. Rex shifted, ears flattening as another volley rattled the windows, glass spiderwebbing but holding. Adrenaline surged through Elias, a bitter rush that made his vision sharpen, colors bleeding vivid against the grey. He thought of his sister again, her small hand in his during those endless nights, promising escape that never came. Guilt twisted like a knife. He'd run alone, leaving her to the shadows. Now, shielding this dog felt like atonement, a small defiance against the world's indifference. But fear clawed at him too. What if they saw him as just another kid in the way? What if this act pulled him from the safety of obscurity? Hale's hand clamped gently on Elias's shoulder, firm but not crushing, grounding him amid the chaos. "Stay low. We've got this." The sergeant nodded toward the line, where dogs from the K9 program strained at leashes held by their handlers, German shepherds and labs, their barks a chorus of warning that cut through the din. These animals weren't pets, they were extensions of the men, senses attuned to threats long after the wars ended. Society misunderstood them all, veterans and their dogs painted as unstable, when in truth they were the steady ones, the quiet guardians, piecing together lives shattered by command. A young soldier nearby, barely out of his teens himself, murmured to his partner dog, "Easy, girl," his voice cracking just enough to reveal the boy beneath the uniform. The confrontation escalated as the shooter's silhouette darted between vehicles, his cries incoherent rants swallowed by the wind. A squad broke off, moving with tactical grace, flanking maneuvers drilled into muscle memory. Radios crackled. Target in sight. Non-lethal if possible. Elias's breath hitched, the hallway's confines amplifying every sound. The soft jingle of tags, the rustle of fabric, the distant thrum of a helicopter circling overhead. Tom's voice rose, directing from the front, his words clipped and calm. "Cover the exits, protect the room." The veterans' faces were masks of focus. But Elias caught the micro-reactions, the flicker of a jaw tightening, eyes softening on a comrade's back. This wasn't bravado. It was the compassion of those who'd seen too much death, determined to rewrite the ending here. Rex pressed closer, his warmth a counterpoint to the chill seeping from the walls. Elias's fingers loosened on the collar, stroking the fur absently, the motion soothing his own trembling. In that suspended breath, determination bloomed amid the fear, a resolve to see this through, to stand unseen no longer. The hallway thrummed with their collective pulse, a battalion reborn in crisis, their misunderstood silence shattering into action. Outside, the gunfire faltered, the first signs of containment rippling through the air like a held breath finally released. But the danger lingered, a shadow uncoiling, testing the fragile threads of humanity, holding them all together. The gunfire outside stuttered into a ragged rhythm, each crack pulling the air taut like a bowstring, ready to snap. Elias's world had narrowed to the sliver of hallway visible from his crouch, the vending machine's cold metal pressing into his spine, a makeshift fortress in the storm. Rex's body heat radiated against him, the dog's ribs expanding and contracting in sync with his own shallow breaths, fur damp with the tension of the moment. The hallway, once a quiet artery of the center, now throbbed with the influx of veterans, boots planted firm on the linoleum, shoulders brushing in a seamless line that stretched from end to end. 150 souls, their presence a low hum of murmured reassurances and the faint clink of dog tags swaying like pendulums against chests. Sergeant Hale shifted beside them, his knee brushing Elias's as he peered out, eyes narrowed against the flashing strobes from the parking lot. The wind outside howled faintly through cracked windows, carrying the gritty scent of disturbed gravel and the sharper tang of exhaust from idling vehicles. "He's cornered," Hale said softly, his voice a gravelly anchor amid the chaos. "But he's not done. Stay with me, kid." Elias nodded, though his throat felt sealed shut, words trapped behind the lump of fear and something fiercer, determination, uncoiling like a spring in his gut. He'd spent years running from confrontations, dodging the raised voices and slamming doors of his past, but this felt different. Rex's trusting weight against him was a tether, pulling him into the fray rather than away. From the front of the line, Tom's commands cut through the din, steady as the tick of a watch in a silent room. "Squad 2, hold the flank. K9 leads on point." The dogs responded first, a ripple of low growls and eager whines spreading through the ranks. Handlers unclipped leashes with practiced flicks, the metal snaps echoing like distant thunder. Labs and shepherds alike surged forward, noses to the ground, their paws padding softly on the tile before transitioning to the crunch of gravel outside. Elias watched as one handler, a woman with a scar tracing her jawline, knelt to murmur to her partner, a sleek Belgian Malinois whose ears twitched at every sound. "Find him, girl. Quiet now." The dog's eyes gleamed with focus, a mirror to the handler's own, both forged in the relentless winds of training grounds where trust was the only currency that mattered. The escalation came swift and brutal. A fresh burst of shots tore from the parking lot, closer now, shattering a side window in a spray of glass that tinkled to the floor like brittle rain. Shards skittered across the linoleum, catching the fluorescent light in fleeting sparks. Elias flinched, his hand instinctively tightening on Rex's collar, the leather biting into his palm. The dog stiffened, a deep rumble building in his chest, but Elias whispered again, "Steady," the word more for himself than the animal. Adrenaline flooded his veins, hot and electric, sharpening his senses until the world buzzed. The metallic click of weapons being chambered, the soft creak of tactical vests straining over broad backs, the collective inhale of the line as they braced. Outside, the shooter broke cover, his figure a blurred shadow darting between cars, boots kicking up gravel that pattered against metal like hail. He was unraveling, face twisted in the erratic pulse of emergency lights, his rifle swinging wild. "You think you can hide?" he bellowed, voice cracking over the wind, laced with the desperation of a man who'd lost everything to shadows of his own making. The words hung in the air, eerily echoing Elias's own buried fears, the accusations hurled in that old house, the blame for a family's fracture pinned on a boy's silence. Guilt surged anew, twisting with the fear, but Elias pushed it down, focusing on the line ahead. These veterans didn't flinch. They advanced, a slow, inexorable wave, dogs weaving through their legs like living tripwires. Hale rose slightly, signaling to a nearby squad. "Breach on my mark." His hand hovered near his sidearm, fingers steady despite the tremor Elias imagined hidden beneath, the kind that came from nights haunted by desert echoes, where one wrong move cost lives. The sergeant glanced back, his eyes meeting Elias's for a beat, conveying a silent understanding. This wasn't just about the shooter. It was about reclaiming ground lost to chaos. Elias's heart pounded, a frantic drum against his ribs, sweat beading cold on his forehead, despite the press of bodies warming the air. He thought of slipping away again, melting into the periphery as he always had. But Rex's gaze held him, dark eyes reflecting the boy's own resolve, a pact unspoken. The confrontation ignited as the first dog broke ahead, barking sharp and commanding, drawing the shooter's fire. Bullets whined past, embedding in the center's brick with dull thuds, dust sifting down like fine ash. The line surged in response, veterans peeling off in pairs, flanking, covering. Their movements, a ballet of controlled fury honed in far-off sands, where wind carried the cries of the fallen. Tom's voice rose again, hoarse but unyielding. "Suppress and advance." A young soldier nearby, dog at heel, fired a warning shot into the air, the report booming like judgment. Elias's breath caught, the hallway vibrating with the recoil's echo, the scent of gunpowder thickening until it coated his tongue. Fear clawed higher, mingling with the guilt that had shadowed him for months. The sister he'd failed, the home he'd fled without looking back. But determination burned brighter now, fueled by the raw humanity unfolding around him. These men, judged by the world as broken relics with their barking companions, moved as one, their compassion a quiet force propelling them forward. A handler took a grazing hit to the arm, blood blooming dark on his sleeve, but he pressed on, dog whining in sympathy, the pair undeterred. Elias's hands shook as he stroked Rex's flank, the fur soft under his fingers, a small anchor in the rising tide. The helicopter's thrum grew louder overhead, rotors slicing the air with mechanical insistence, its spotlight sweeping the lot in blinding arcs. The shooter faltered, cornered against a chain-link fence, his breaths ragged over the radio's chatter. "Target pinned! Hold fire!" Hale's grip on Elias's shoulder tightened, a reassuring pulse. "Almost there, kid. You did this. Gave us the edge." Elias swallowed, the words landing like warmth in the chill. But the danger coiled tighter, the hallway's confines amplifying every heartbeat, every distant bark. Resolve hardened in his chest, a fragile shield against the storm, as the veterans closed in, their wall unbreakable. Humanity's quiet roar, drowning the chaos one step at a time. Comment where you're watching from. I want to know how far these stories of courage and loyalty can travel. The helicopter's spotlight carved erratic paths across the parking lot, bathing the scene in stark white contrasts that turned gravel into glittering shards and shadows into lurking threats. Elias huddled tighter behind the vending machine, the machine's hum a feeble counterpoint to the chaos, its vibrations traveling up his spine like a warning. Rex's ears flicked at every new sound, the sharp whine of ricochets, the guttural commands barked between handlers, the low, collective murmur of the veterans holding their line. The air in the hallway had grown stifling, heavy with the mingled scents of sweat-soaked uniforms, oiled leather from holsters, and the faint, coppery hint of blood from the wounded handler's arm. Elias's palms itched with drying sweat, his fingers still tangled in Rex's collar, the dog's pulse, a rapid thrum syncing with his own racing heart. From the front, the advance pressed on, a deliberate creep that belied the storm within each man. Tom's silhouette stood resolute at the edge of the doorway, his frame silhouetted against the flashing lights, one hand extended to steady a younger veteran whose breaths came in ragged bursts. The shooter had retreated further, his back to the fence now, the chain link rattling under his frantic scrabbling as he reloaded. His shouts devolved into incoherent fragments. "You don't know. You can't." Swallowed by the wind that gusted through the lot, carrying the distant wail of more sirens converging on the town, Elias caught glimpses through the press of bodies, dogs weaving low to the ground, their noses questing, tails stiff with purpose. One Malinois, led by a handler with a prosthetic leg that clicked softly on the asphalt, zeroed in on the target's position. A soft growl building to a crescendo that made the shooter's head snap toward the sound. Hale leaned in closer, his breath warm and steady against Elias's ear. "He's breaking. Watch the flanks. Dogs'll flush him." The sergeant's words were calm, but Elias saw the micro-tremor in his jaw, the way his eyes flicked to the shadows beyond the cars. Haunted by memories of ambushes where the wind had masked the enemy's approach, these veterans carried the desert in their bones, the relentless grit underfoot, the way sand clogged rifles and throats alike, turning every step into a gamble. Society back home painted them as distant, their silences mistaken for anger, their bonds with K9 partners dismissed as crutches for the unhinged. War dogs and their ghosts. A passerby had once sneered at Tom in a coffee shop, ignoring how Rex's presence steadied the man's hands during quiet tremors. But in this hallway, that misunderstanding shattered. Their toughness was a veil over wounds that bled compassion, a fierce protectiveness for the overlooked, much like Elias himself. Adrenaline coursed through Elias like liquid fire, sharpening the edges of fear into something almost tangible. His mind flashed to the night he'd fled, rain-slick streets mirroring this gravel chaos, the echo of his father's bellows chasing him into the dark. He'd left his sister behind, her small form huddled in the corner, eyes wide with the same terror he felt now. Guilt clawed deeper, a vice around his chest, making each breath labored. Why couldn't he have been braver then? Why did saving this dog feel like the first right thing in years? Rex shifted, licking Elias's hand with a rough tongue, the gesture pulling a choked sound from the boy's throat. He wasn't a hero. He was just surviving. Yet here he was, woven into this tapestry of resolve. The escalation hit like a thunderclap. The shooter, sensing the noose tightening, fired wildly toward the advancing dogs, a desperate spray that sent one lab yelping back, its handler diving to shield it with his body. The impact thudded dully, the man's grunt lost in the uproar. But the line didn't break. Instead, it surged, veterans peeling off in coordinated bursts. Two squads flanking left, their boots crunching gravel in unison, dog tags jingling like talismans against the night. Tom's voice pierced the fray, raw-edged but unyielding. Non-lethal. Take him down. A K-9 team broke through, the Malinois launching forward with a blur of muscle and fang, clamping onto the shooter's leg in a controlled takedown. The man howled, weapon clattering to the ground, his body crumpling as handlers swarmed. Zip ties snapping into place with efficient clicks. Elias rose halfway, compelled by the shift, Rex pulling at his side as if sensing the tide turning. The hallway vibrated with the aftermath, the heavy pants of men and dogs, the soft whines of the injured animal being tended by a comrade, whose hands moved with the gentleness of one who'd patched up far worse in field tents under starless skies. Hale stood fully now, helping Elias to his feet, the boy's legs unsteady beneath him. "It's over," the sergeant said, but his eyes scanned the lot still, vigilance etched into every line of his face. The helicopter circled lower, its downdraft whipping dust into eddies that stung exposed skin, the rotor wash mingling with the earthy scent of disturbed soil. In the sudden hush that followed, as police sirens drowned the echoes, a deeper truth began to surface, rippling through the veterans like a shared breath. Tom approached through the dispersing line, Rex bounding to him with a joyful bark that cut the tension. The older man knelt, burying his face in the dog's fur for a moment, shoulders shaking, not from fear but release. His eyes lifted to Elias, holding the boy's gaze with an intensity that stripped away the years. "You remind me of my son," Tom murmured, voice thick, the words hanging in the cooling air. "Lost him in the sandbox. Same eyes, quiet, but seeing everything. Rex. He went for him that day too, pulled him from the wreck, but it wasn't enough." The revelation landed like a stone in still water, stirring the guilt Elias carried. Tom's loss mirrored the boy's own failure, a parallel of abandonment and unspoken pleas. The hallway, still filled with the battalion's presence, seemed to contract around them, the fluorescent lights casting soft halos on faces marked by quiet understanding. Hale nodded, his hand lingering on Elias's shoulder. "We all carry ghosts, kid. But you gave us back a piece of ours today." Other veterans gathered closer, their dogs settling at their feet, a circle of scarred hands and loyal shadows. The wind outside died to a whisper, gravel settling underfoot, as the first hints of dawn bled grey into the sky. Elias's chest tightened, not with fear now, but with the weight of belonging, an unexpected thread weaving him into their fold, where compassion hid behind the armour of silence. The danger had passed, but in its wake something profound stirred, redefining the boy who'd always run alone. The dawn light filtered through the shattered windows like a hesitant promise, casting elongated shadows across the hallway where the veterans lingered, their forms a tableau of weary triumph. Elias stood amid them, the cool tile beneath his sneakers grounding him as the adrenaline ebbed, leaving a hollow ache in his limbs. Rex sat at his feet now, the dog's tail thumping softly against the floor, a rhythmic affirmation that cut through the settling dust motes dancing in the air. The scent of gunpowder had faded somewhat, replaced by the warmer notes of coffee brewing in the center's small kitchen, someone's instinctive ritual to reclaim normalcy. Outside, the parking lot hummed with activity, officers securing the scene, the gravel crunching under measured steps, the low whine of an ambulance pulling away with the wounded handler, his dog trotting anxiously beside the stretcher. Tom rose slowly from his kneel, his hand lingering on Rex's head, fingers tracing the familiar contours of the shepherd's ears. The older veteran's eyes, rimmed with the red of unshed tears, held Elias's without wavering, the weight of his confession still echoing in the quiet space between them. "That boy, my son, he was like you," Tom continued, his voice a low rumble, roughened by years of desert winds and unspoken grief. 17 when he shipped out, thought he could fix the world, one quiet act at a time. But the war took him, and Rex. Rex tried, pulled him from the rubble, but the bleeding wouldn't stop. The words hung heavy, stirring the air like a chill draught from the broken panes. Elias felt his own guilt mirror Tom's loss, a shared fracture, the sister he'd abandoned to her fate, her small voice calling after him in dreams that never let him rest. The revelation redefined the morning's chaos. Elias wasn't just a bystander anymore, but an echo of what these men had buried, pulling their compassion to the surface in ways they hadn't anticipated. The battalion shifted around them, a subtle closing of ranks, shoulders brushing in silent solidarity. Sergeant Hale stepped forward, his broad frame parting the group like a gentle current, the faint scent of sandalwood from his soap mingling with the earthy residue of the dogs. In his palm he held a small, tarnished coin, the battalion emblem, etched with a stylized K9 silhouette against a backdrop of rolling dunes, the edges worn smooth from years of pocket carrying. "This isn't just metal," Hale said, extending it toward Elias, his gaze steady, conveying the depth of what it represented. "It's a piece of us, the ones who came back and the ones who didn't. You earned it today, kid, shielding Rex. That was the kind of loyalty we fight for." Elias's fingers hesitated, trembling slightly as they closed around the coin, its cool weight settling into his palm like an anchor. No one had ever given him something so deliberate, so laden with meaning. Not the foster parents with their clipped instructions, nor the strangers who'd tossed him spare change with averted eyes. The hallway, still lined with the 150 strong, seemed to breathe with them. The fluorescent lights humming softly overhead, casting a warm glow on faces marked by quiet approval. A young handler nearby, her Malinois leaning against her leg, nodded to Elias, her eyes softening with recognition. "My partner here. She lost her first litter in an explosion. Saved me anyway. You're one of us now. Part of the pack." The words wove through the group, eliciting murmurs of agreement, dog tags clinking as men adjusted their stances, the sound a soft chorus of acceptance. Elias's throat tightened, the coin pressing into his skin, its emblem a symbol of belonging he'd never sought but now couldn't release. These veterans, misunderstood by a world that saw only their scars and silences, offered him what society had denied: protection wrapped in compassion, a family forged not by blood but by acts in the shadow of danger. As the first rays of sun pierced the grey, warming the chill air that had seeped in during the night, Tom placed a hand on Elias's shoulder, the touch firm yet tender, calluses rough against the boy's jacket. "We don't leave our own behind," he said, his voice gaining strength, echoing the resolve that had filled the hallway hours before. "That shooter's in custody now, rattling off excuses about debts and demons. But you stepped up when the rest of us froze for a second, remembering our own ghosts." Elias glanced down at Rex, the dog nuzzling his free hand, the warmth of the gesture seeping into his bones. The guilt that had shadowed him eased fractionally, replaced by a tentative sense of redemption, not erasure of the past, but a bridge towards something whole. The veterans began to disperse slowly, squads breaking off to assist with cleanup, sweeping glass with careful sweeps, tending to the dogs with gentle strokes and water bowls that clinked against the floor. Hale lingered, his presence a quiet vow. "Stick around, Elias. We've got room at the base, counseling, training with the K9s, no more running alone." The center stirred back to life, the bulletin boards fluttering slightly in the breeze from an open door, flyers about therapy sessions catching the light. Elias pocketed the coin, its edges grounding him amid the emotional swell, the micro-reactions around him, a veteran's subtle nod, the soft huff of a dog settling, Tom's faint smile breaking through the lines of his face, This act of kindness had unraveled something profound, revealing the humanity beneath their armored exteriors, the quiet heroism that bound them all. The hallway, once a vessel of vulnerability, now pulsed with the promise of community, a sanctuary where overlooked souls found their place. Elias breathed deeply, the air carrying hints of fresh rain on the horizon, as the weight of acceptance settled over him like a well-worn blanket, warm against the lingering cold of his solitude. The sun climbed higher, its pale light spilling across the hallway like spilled milk, softening the jagged edges of shattered glass that still littered the floor. Elias traced the battalion coin in his pocket with his thumb, the raised emblem, a tactile reminder of the morning's improbable turn. The center hummed with subdued activity now, veterans methodically restoring order, their movements deliberate and unhurried, as if piecing together more than just the physical remnants of chaos. Rex leaned against Elias's leg, the dog's warmth a steady presence, his ears occasionally perking at the distant commands filtering in from the parking lot. The air carried a cleaner scent, the gunpowder dissipated by the breeze that rustled through the open doors, mingling with the faint, comforting aroma of fresh brewed coffee and the subtle earthiness of the canines settling into rest. Tom lingered nearby, his posture less rigid now, the lines around his eyes deepening with a mix of exhaustion and quiet relief. He watched Elias with an intensity that spoke volumes, the silence between them thick with unspoken layers. "That look you had, pulling Rex back," Tom said finally, his voice low, gravelly from years of shouting over rotor blades and sandstorms. "It hit me like a flashback. My son, Danny, he had that same fire. 17, just like you. He was the one who signed up for canine handling, said the dogs got him through the nights when the rest of us couldn't. But in that ambush..." Tom's words trailed, his gaze drifting to the window where dawn painted the gravel in golden hues. He swallowed hard, the motion visible in the bob of his throat, a micro-reaction betraying the armor of composure. Rex was Danny's dog first, trained him himself. When the IED went off, Rex dragged Danny clear, but the shrapnel, it was too much. We buried my boy with that shepherd, whining at the graveside like he knew. Elias's breath caught, the coin suddenly heavier in his hand. The revelation washed over him like cool water on fevered skin, redefining the chaos they'd all endured. Tom's loss wasn't abstract. It was etched in the dog's unwavering loyalty, in the way Rex had charged into danger that morning, echoing a past heroism that had ended in tragedy. Elias saw himself in that mirror. The abused teen who'd fled a home of bruises and broken promises, leaving his sister to face the storm alone. Her face flickered in his mind, small and pleading, the guilt a constant shadow that had driven him to the streets. But here, in this hallway lined with men who'd stared down worse, he recognized the parallel, the quiet drive to protect, even when it cost everything. I left her," Elias whispered, the words escaping unbidden, his voice cracking in the relative quiet. "My sister." Thought running would keep her safe from him, but it didn't. "I see her every night, waiting." The admission hung in the air, vulnerable and raw, drawing nods from the circle of veterans who had paused in their tasks. Hale stepped closer, his hand finding Elias's shoulder again, the touch a bridge across their shared fractures. "We all got those ghosts, kid. Danny's was the reason Tom started this program, giving strays like Rex a purpose, pulling kids like you into the fold before the streets claim 'em." The sergeant's eyes softened, revealing the compassion beneath his tactical facade, the kind society overlooked in favor of tales of unyielding soldiers. These men, judged as distant relics with their barking companions, carried redemption in their rituals, late-night patrols with K9s to clear their heads, community barbecues where stories flowed freer than the beer, Elias's act had pierced that veil, reminding them of the boy they'd lost, turning a stranger's courage into a collective healing. As the group tightened, a deeper emotional truth unfolded, rippling through the hallway like a held breath released. One by one, they shared fragments. A handler admitting how her dog's instinct had saved her in a convoy blast, only to lose the animal months later. Another veteran confessing the guilt of leaving squad mates behind in the dunes. Elias listened, his trembling hands stilling as Rex's head rested on his knee, the dog's eyes half closed in trust. This wasn't pity, it was recognition. The overlooked teen becoming the symbol of their unresolved pains, his kindness a catalyst that bound old wounds with new purpose. The battalion, 150 strong, had filled this space not just to confront danger, but to reclaim the humanity they'd fought to preserve, their quiet heroism blooming in the aftermath. Hale pulled a thin chain from around his neck, a dog tag dangling from it, simple steel etched with the K9 emblem worn smooth by time. "Wear this," he said, looping it over Elias's head, the metal cool against his skin. "It's not just for show. Means you're under our watch now. Protection, training, a spot in the squad if you want it. No more fading into the grey." The tag settled against Elias's chest, its weight a promise. The emblem glinting under the lights like a beacon. Murmurs of approval rose, soft and affirming, as dogs whined in echo, their tails sweeping the floor. Tom nodded, his hand clasping Elias's briefly, the grip conveying the unspoken vow. Family, forged in fire and fidelity. The center's hallway, bathed in morning light, felt transformed, a sanctuary where silence gave way to subtle connections. The fluorescent hum, underscoring the soft exchanges. Elias touched the tag, feeling its edges, the guilt in his core easing into tentative peace. The veterans dispersed gradually, squads heading to the base with plans for debriefs and dog walks, their boots echoing faintly on the gravel outside. Elias stayed, Rex at his side, the warmth of acceptance seeping into the cracks of his solitude. In this unexpected community, redemption whispered through the acts of compassion, proving that even the most overlooked could find their place among the steadfast. As the sun rose fully, casting long shadows that danced with promise, the story of that cold morning lingered in the air, a testament to quiet heroism amid misunderstanding. Elias walked out with Tom and Hale, the battalion's convoy rumbling to life in the lot, engines purring like contented guardians. The wind carried the faint bark of K9s, a chorus of loyalty that followed them into the day. If this story already has your heart, hit the like button. It helps the story of Elias reach more people who still believe in humanity. Subscribe for more stories of compassion, justice, and redemption. Thank you for watching the case of abused teen. Helped a veteran's dog during a shooting. 150 soldiers filled the hallway. See you in the next one.